Making shitty leaders less shitty. How dare I talk about a topic like this? What does that mean? So it's been quite a ride, and I say it quite with a lot of humor and a lot of respect and a lot of humility, that over the last couple of months, since the books have launched, book 1, The Yellow Background, launched over a year ago. Book 2 launched the end of January. I had the absolute pleasure of speaking at a human resources conference in Toronto, Canada, earlier this year at the HRPA 2018. I was one of their speakers, and that had been in the works for the better part of a year. And when I had said in my proposal about talking about shitty leadership, they jumped at the chance, and it was a unanimous decision to have this provocative topic discussed at the HR conference. And I wasn't quite sure how many people were going to show up and sign up for my lecture. And when I arrived on that day and I saw that I thought I was going to be in a room of 30 people, then I was in a room of 180, standing room only. I was completely overwhelmed, but all in a good way, because so many people wanted to understand what we were talking about. So some had read the book, some bought the books at the conference. And it was really an opportunity to sort of get this whole innovative disruption, let's start this revolution and come together and help each other world that, we get swallowed up in, that maintains this sort of concept of shitty leadership. So in my opening remarks here, the first thing I really want to make clear, if you're not familiar with who I am, if you're not familiar with the books, if you're not familiar with the webinar series or the lectures or the work that we do with our corporate workshops, shitty leaders are not shitty people. I have to say that emphatically. I do not intend to say it condescendingly or patronizingly in any way, shape, or form. I say it from a place of humility. Shitty leaders are not shitty people. We need to be really clear and unified on that. So now that I've said that, you can answer the poll question if you want to, but I would still ask, refrain for a bit. So what does this all mean? So shitty leaders are not shitty people. They are, what they demonstrate is shitty leadership behavior. And so if I was to ask you this question reflectively, because obviously you can't speak back, what does that mean to you? So when you think about the term shitty leaders, what we did about a year and a half ago in the planning of book 1 is I had a phone case made. And my phone case was the cover of book 1. And it said very clearly in the bold black and red letters, a how-to guide for shitty leaders to become less shitty through active leadership. And so I'd be standing in line at the grocery store. I'd be out somewhere with friends. I would be on a plane. I'd be traveling, whatever. And I would, of course, show my case because it was a shameless plug. Why not? And I would just randomly ask people, the people I knew or people, various different countries, people, so forth. You get it. I'd be like, what do you think of that? And I got to tell you, in the year 6, 7, 8, 9 months that we did that sort of no parameter kind of sort of study, the reactions to my question were identical. It didn't matter where I was, who I was talking with. Everyone was able to say, oh my God, I love that, referring to the tagline. I need a copy of that for this person. I need a copy of that for that person. I need a copy of that for my current boss. I need a copy of that for the last 12 bosses I've worked for. It was the same. Even some of my Ego Continuum associates asked people the same question and had the same response. No one, and this is the part that always fascinates me when I share this story, not one person, we're talking a couple hundred people here, not one person looked at it and said, oh, you know what? I need a copy of that for me. Not one person. Yet everyone was so quick to be able to say and identify what shitty leaders demonstrated to the point where they could label someone they used to work for or currently work for as a shitty leader. So our sort of analytics behind this was that the people we polled basically believe that shitty leadership behaviors are done to them. It is something that they are in receipt of. It is not necessarily something that at first glance they think that they do themselves. So we needed to go one step further. We needed to take this to a new level. So I then started asking people, what is it that you thought of? What came to mind? As soon as I said, what do you think of this? You were able to say, I need a copy of this book for these people. What did those people do or demonstrate that made you label them a shitty leader? And the responses, again, were the same. They blame, they shame. They're not approachable. They're not supportive. They seem robotic. They're dead inside. They don't give feedback, or they give feedback and it's more about them and not about us. They don't seem to care. They just have this overall appearance of shitty, which can go from one end of the universe and back. So I then wanted to again go further. So then I said, all right, well, what does that incite in you? What do you feel being on the receiving end of those behaviors? So this is where it starts to get interesting, because this list becomes just as long, if not longer. So corporate apathy, disengagement, not being aligned, unclear expectations. I feel apathy. I feel what we deem Sunday despair. So that feeling of hating my job so much that Sunday nights, my mood changes and I don't realize that it's because I either don't like my boss or I don't like my job and I don't want to go to work. So, but some people are trapped and they go to work because they have to, not necessarily because they want to. So then they start looking for new work and but nothing gets solved. And don't forget the fact too, that some of those people that we spoke to, not only are employees, but they are also shitty leaders. So shitty leaders who don't look up, people, let's face it, people look up at work to see what good looks like. So if they're not emulating what's coming down, if the cascading good leadership isn't coming down, then this problem just perpetuates, right? So I'm a shitty leader. I don't recognize that I'm a shitty leader because I believe it's something that happens to me, not something I do. So I haven't made that connection. I can't stand my boss, but I have employees who can't stand me. The cycle continues, right? So it's creating this wake up. It's time to wake up. It's time to really come together and start thinking about, how do we get this conversation? How do we get this dialogue starting to impact people? And I got to tell you, folks, I preach, but I get excited. I get very passionate about this stuff, which is what you're seeing now, which can easily be misconstrued for other things. But for me, it's recognizing that when people have that revelation of shitty leadership, when they recognize that, oh God, maybe this is something that I do or did, the first reaction, it's one of two reactions. And I actually published an article a few weeks ago on LinkedIn about this. Deflection becomes reflection. And most people, I would say 85%, I'd even go as high as 90, have said, yeah, you make me think. You're making me think. I like that. And of course, as an author and as hopefully an educator and as hopefully a future influencer, there's no greater reward for me than someone saying I've made someone think and reflect. That's awesome. That's exactly what the purpose of this is. This is why, shitty leadership is as provocative as it is. It's meant to be. It's meant to incite a reaction. It's meant to get you thinking. It's not to blame and shame. It's not to try to make you feel bad, although we can get into that whole dichotomy of, do others make you feel or do you not choose to feel? So that is a power of choice concept. That is part of our workshop material. However, when you think about it at that level, most people who are able to reflect, effectively reflect, authentically reflect, who don't fear connection, they are able to say, you know what, maybe this is worth exploring. I get it. I get you're not trying to blame and shame me. I get you're trying to get me to think. And that's when people go to shame. Shame is the byproduct of the recognition of a behavior that you didn't necessarily realize or, articulate brain-wise that you didn't make the connection that it was something you were doing, or that others were at least perceiving that that's what it was. So instantly you see, and I've seen it in workshops where the head goes down and people are like, oh my God, I didn't realize I was doing that. Hand on heart, I'm one of them as well. So I declare I'm a reformed non-shitty leader with the best intentions. So, at the end of the day, you want to be able to have these conversations with people. And, we're certainly not inferring that, you start going up to people saying, you're a shitty leader. It doesn't really, because that is blaming and shaming. And that's not what is intended. What's intended is to, spark a conversation and have an honest adult, authentic conversation where people are willing to take a look inside and say, things have to change because we're not talking about this level. And you get the people who like to discredit and say, Mark, I love what you do, but this is way too touchy-feely for me. And I get it. And you know what? you know what? People fear talking about themselves. People feel vulnerability. Vulnerability to many people is a weakness. It's a strength to us, as it is to many others. And so, again, that's the shame. That's the innovative disruption. If it feels uncomfortable and you don't want to talk about it, that is more reason to talk about it. So whether it's writing an article or doing continuing education or doing, you know, something along those lines, that is the whole purpose of this material, is to help you help yourself to say, it's time to take a look internal. And so from a leadership development perspective, this connects so perfectly, because the whole concept of understanding your own shitty leadership behaviors is to be able to look inside. And unless you're truly self-aware, you can't do that. So I'm going to take a look and see. All right, no questions, but by all means, feel free. I'm just curious now. And we have some, okay. We have some people that have answered. So we've got, someone is uncomfortable answering the question. That's very interesting. So whoever you are, I want you to reflect as we continue on this and see if if you would have changed your answer by the end of this, because that's the shame piece I was just talking about. So think about that, and it's okay. Brene Brown says, lean into the discomfort. God, I love her. Lean into the discomfort. And so lean into it. It's not about calling you out. It's about leaning into it and have that call on that courage to be able to say, let's take a look. All right, so that being said, here are your key learning outcomes from today. This was identical to my lecture that I did at HRPA 2018. The only thing that's changed is the bottom one. So gain an understanding of our active leadership framework and how it promotes this level of change. So exactly what I've just spoken about. I'm going to take a sip of my drink while you read through that quickly there, and we'll keep going. Oh, gotta love it. All right. So moving on. Active leadership. So the cure for shitty leadership is active leadership. So the first question I want to ask you, and this is for all of you fans out there who are like, oh, he's going to go touchy-feely on me again. Great. So self-awareness. Self-awareness, for those who fear it, comes across as being touchy-feely. I can tell you there is nothing touchy-feely in my lens about self-awareness. This is hard-hitting, direct, in-your-face, fact-finding, peel back the layers of the onion. I'm afraid, terrified to open Pandora's box because I'm afraid of what I'm going to find in about myself that I either have been lying to myself for years about, or have finally had the courage to say, enough's enough, let's take a look. So that's not my definition of touchy-feely at all. But once you've recognized the areas that you're not happy with, then it's the support you receive to be confident enough to change it and to then find new behaviors. That is when the touchy-feely kicks in. So the first part isn't at all. So from that perspective, self-awareness. So for all of you that are here, let's get a little cozy. I want you to think, I want you to reflect for a minute. Are you self-aware enough to know you're self-aware? You ask anyone, are you self-aware? They're going to go, yeah, of course I am. I'm like, great, awesome. How do you know? I don't know, never thought of it. I know, exactly. Again, the uncomfortable stuff about that is that the uncomfortable piece of that is that's the shame. That's where we get into that whole thing. That is the shame element and all that stuff that we talked about before. So think about, are you self-aware enough to know you're self-aware? What is self-awareness? It's that ability to identify self, right? It's that ability to be able to say, who am I? How am I perceived? What does this have to do with leadership? Well, if shitty leadership behaviors are determined by the observer as perception, and I'm not aware of the shadows I cast when I walk in and out of a room, is that not a limited self-awareness? Is that not potentially one aspect of a limited self-awareness? If I'm talking about me and I am so passionate about this stuff, others may perceive that passion as anger. Others may perceive that passion as, you know, another emotion, another feeling. Unless I tell you and I let you know up front what it is that you're seeing, then there's confusion. There's that perception. Great example that was shared in one of the webinars was about playing favorites. So most leaders will say, if they're asked the question, do you play favorites? Most will say, no, of course not. I treat everyone equally. Yet one person is my go-to. I go to them for everything because they know the internal system. They know all the information. They know. So I go to them simply because we've got a good rapport and I know I'm going to get an answer. Well, I've got 15 people on my team that are just as credible as the person who I go to, yet I never go to them. So the person who I go to doesn't really see it because that's their normal behavior. The other people, however, feel left out. So that could be causing disengagement. It could be causing dissension amongst the team of peers. It could be causing people to pigeonhole me as playing favorites, which then can determine how they perceive me in other areas. So minor example, but a very powerful one. Because unless you're having these conversations, these things fester. And let's face it, people like to talk at work. People at work who don't normally get along will get along when they have a common enemy. And that is a known fact within any social setting. Adults, teenagers, it doesn't matter. If there is a common enemy, people will bound based on that. They will come together based on that common enemy. So if you're not self-aware enough to know what's happening, and you're in a leadership position, and there's this mismatch of perceptions floating around, you could be that enemy. Do you want to be that enemy? Because you're there to help. So again, you can't control everyone's perceptions about you, but you can be self-aware enough to know what's going on. And then you have then the choice and the ability to fix it. Leadership brand is the next level of this, and you can't create your leadership brand unless you become self-aware. So we have, continuing education modules where we do self-awareness as a standalone and we do effective feedback delivery as a standalone. Leadership brand, the only prerequisite with leadership brand is that you have to take self-awareness before you do leadership brand. Leadership brand is exactly that. It's creating your brand and then marketing and owning that with your staff. So I'm a creative leader. I have to think about being more linear, but I can be, but my natural is about people and how they feel. And that's really what I'm all about. So what's your elevator pitch? What type of leader are you from that perspective? And then the final piece of this is effective feedback delivery. Just doing a time check, we're good. So effective feedback delivery. So I always say to new leaders, welcome to leadership. Guess what? It's no longer about you. So from that perspective, it's crucial to understand the audience. It's crucial to understand how everyone likes to receive feedback. How do people like to be led? So from that perspective, there are two questions, and I write about this in book 1, and it is part of our syllabus here. So how do you like to be led? How do you like to receive feedback? And asking those questions, the power in asking those questions to your staff is absolutely imperative in moving away from shitty leadership perceptions and behaviors. And we can get more into that in detail. So let's continue. I see we've got no questions, waiting for the first couple to get up and dance, and then questions will flow. All right, so moving on. Don't be shy, folks. Seriously, if you have a question, by all means, I'm welcome it. So when we look at active leadership on the surface, and we look at the sort of linkages between self-awareness, leadership brand, and effective feedback delivery, and how that encompasses active leadership, which then is, I like to joke about, the cure for shitty leadership. So we've got 5 modules that we start with. And they go through and follow, if you're into change management at all, they follow. So there's a crazy cat here at my feet. So that's what keeps my attention going. So yes, I know, you're beautiful. All right. So anyway, so we've got 5 modules and we follow the ADKAR process. ADKAR, ADKAR, stands for, and you can see it on the slide, awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement. And so it helps with the enablement piece of really getting ready and understanding where this starts and what the outcomes are and what the expected outcomes are and what you should or think about what you may experience as you're going through this. So I won't spend a lot of time on this because it gets into the nitty-gritty, but by all means, this is an opportunity for you to sort of see where this goes and how this evolves and the linkages between getting to become more aware of your own leadership within your current organization, as well as how it influences and impacts you personally, to where this goes and how this active leadership format gets sort of evolves into your organization at a wider level. So it's not just about active leadership. Active leadership is that sort of first step in getting to where you need to be from that perspective. So that being said, let's move on. Crazy cat check. Yeah. Unreal. So self-awareness, the first pillar of active leadership. Are you self-aware enough to know you're self-aware? The dialogues that we get into on this question is quite interesting, and it's one of my favorite sections, because when you're willing to make the leap into calling on your courage and really focusing on that, yeah, I'm willing and courageous enough to look internally and to be able to say, yeah, I need to figure this out. I need to think about, I'm willing. That's really what it is. This is all about that willingness to be able to say, okay, I'm going to move forward. So ask anyone, like I said, if they know they're self-aware, and of course they're going to say, sure, I am. So let's go one step further. So think about what I like to call your triggers. Think about what are those things that you notice happens that you allow yourself to get set off. So things change. It might not necessarily be at work, but you know, people always mention things like traffic, getting stuck in traffic. You know, a big one that people have mentioned in these sessions and in our workshops were things like, you know, you make the effort to stand and hold the door open for someone, and you wait 5, 6, 7 seconds because you see them coming, but you wait, and then they walk right by you and don't acknowledge. They don't acknowledge you, and they don't even say thank you. So your response is, oh, you're welcome. And then you get into a bit of a pissy mood as a result of that. And then that continues out throughout the rest of your day, or getting stuck in traffic. And it's, you know, this sort of contagious behavior of, you know, negative output from a situation that if you really sort of thought about it and applied some self-awareness techniques, you would realize the rationale behind it, and that getting emotional or having an emotional reaction to it is actually a counterproductive behavior that can lead to a misperception. So one of the things that my response to the people, and there were several people in this one instance who mentioned about their holding a door for someone. So I asked them, well, why did you hold the door? Why did you choose to do that? Because I wanted to, because, you know, it was just a nice thing to do. So when you do nice things, do you expect a reaction? Do you expect a thank you? Because are you doing it for the reaction, or are you doing it just because you want to be nice to a stranger? You want to be nice to another person. So do you really need the thank you and validation? Because that's actually why you got upset, because the interaction occurred, but the expectation you had in that outcome wasn't the outcome that you thought you were going to get. Because it's very nice of you to wait and take 5, 6, 7 seconds out of your day to hold the door for someone, but did you do it because you solely wanted to be nice, or is their reaction worthy of you changing how you feel as a result of doing that good deed? So some people buy that and go, oh, I never thought of it that way. And other people are like, no, I expect a thank you. I'm like, all right, well then, you know, when you look at things, and we talk a lot about right versus kind, why is it that you know, we always like to promote choosing kindness. And when you choose right, does choosing kind mean that you're wrong? When you look at it from a right and kind dichotomy? And no, it's just, you have to then look at, well, why do you want to be right? Because if you want to be right so the other person is wrong, then that's a self-awareness requirement that I would go a bit deeper on and look at what is this insatiable need to want to be right. Now, what if all of this applies at work? What if some of these things apply with your current team and you're the leader? What if some of this applies with you as an employee and these are perceptions you have about your leader? What do you do about that? How do you fix that? How do you handle that? So it starts from your lens. It starts from you looking inside. So again, a lot of people are like, oh, he's going to go touchy-feely here. Well, is talking about this kind of stuff touchy-feely, or is it just an awareness of self? Is it determining the variance between self-weakness versus self-awareness? Again, yours to decide from how you perceive the detail and the information. But when you look at it from that perspective, what do you think? So think about that. So this goes even further into triggers. We talk a lot about what are those emotional triggers that set you off. We also talk a lot about energy vampires and how if you think about your energy as a commodity, why do you give it away so freely to people? Why do you allow the transactional situations to determine how you feel, or to allow it to change how you feel? you know, you go out for dinner with friends and someone gets pissed off because they're waiting for a table, and it changes their whole personality. It changes their whole behavior. Not personality. It changes their whole behavior. Personality is who you are. Behavior is what you do. So again, think about that. I'm glad I corrected myself. So when you think about things like that to that level, you know, if we're allowing ourselves to become emotionally connected to things that really don't matter, like whether someone says thank you when you hold the door or getting stuck in traffic, leave more time, check traffic reports, go a different way, leave earlier. Again, we choose to sometimes, and this is sort of where we get into some, you know, deeper discussion, is what if you become your own energy vampire? What if your negative thoughts are so negative that you're actually causing these misperceptions yourself, and it's actually not an outside thing at all? Been there, done that. And we've got people on today's webinar who I have personal relationships with who know exactly what I'm talking about. So again, you know, self-reformed, self-proclaimed shitty leader with the best intentions, and I'm constantly working on it as well. So I'm very guilty of being my own negative Nelly. I can very easily fall down that path where I lose my frequency and I'm focused on things, and then I need to vent, and then I'm like, well, do I really need to? Because at the end of the day, am I making more out of this than I need to? Because I really like simplicity. So focusing on that level. So again, I'm assuming virtual head nods. I'm starting to feel that on this call, on this webinar. So again, lots to discuss, lots to digest, but think about that. So now we move on to leadership brands. So you've now become masters of your own self-awareness. Excuse me, you've identified the differences between self-weakness versus self-awareness, and you're now ready to start plotting your leadership brand. So who are you? How do you identify as a leader? What is your personal leadership style? What is your 30-second elevator pitch about who you are as a leader? Have you ever given that thought? If not, think about it. Reflect on whether you would reflect on that. How would you answer that question? Tell me about your leadership style. Are you creative? Are you linear? Are you introvert? Are you extrovert? Are you dictator? Are you democracy? Think about, and there's so many, and as we build this within our workshops and our continuing education platforms, this is a big piece of work, because it takes a lot of thinking, and a lot of times people will overthink it. Go simplistic. Just keep it simple. So what's important to you? What is important to you? So the importance piece comes out about things like, how do you want to be led versus how do you lead? So how you want to be led is a discussion you need to have with your boss. How you want to lead is a discussion you need to have with your employees. So again, it's what are those things that are important to you? Then we move into what do I need? Meaning, what do you need? So whatever you need, sorry, the cat, hey, yeah, never comes around me ever. Now I'm here with all of you lovely people, and he wants attention. Never fails. Anyway, it's quite funny. So what I need. This includes your motivators and your potential triggers. So think about what your potential triggers are and what you can do from a self-awareness perspective to try to avoid them. So what's the antidote for not taking the bait and making the emotional connection for those triggers? Again, lots to think about, and we get into some amazing dialogue during this level of workshop where you start learning from other people, and it's fascinating when you see people come together that wouldn't normally. Potential misperceptions I like to call out as, what are those things that you sometimes about yourself feel that you need to defend? So for me, I feel like I need to defend my passion, because my passion is often misconstrued. So people will say, why is Mark upset? Why is Mark angry? Why is Mark this? I'm like, Mark's just passionate. Like, I love this stuff. I love talking about this stuff. I enjoy, I did not mean to do that. I enjoy helping people. You know, that's just me, but sometimes people will misread that. So if they are, I look at that and take it seriously and say, well, how can I help you see it differently from a lens awareness perspective? And then finally, things like key drivers. I like inclusion. I will be a dictator when I need to be, because if I need to be, I will be, but I'll let you know I'm being a dictator because my personal choice is to always lead through democracy. Some people see leading through democracy as weakness. Again, it's not from my lens, but for me, I'm all about the inclusion and about, you know, influencing people to feel the right way so that they are in the right frame of mind to then go and do the work. So Some people just want to get their head down and do it. So I'm always on the lookout in my one-on-ones and when I'm meeting with my staff to really figure out what makes them tick and then to customize my brand that helps them with the pieces they need. So it's not about forcing a brand onto people. It's not about lying to make your brand different and vary to support your staff. It's helping people understand who you are so that they can then hold you accountable to demonstrate the right behaviors and not the shitty ones. And then what you clearly are doing, which we don't necessarily articulate right away, but what ends up happening is that by marketing and owning this in the right way and developing an authentic leadership brand, you're actually teaching your staff to manage up. That builds trust. Trust is not a factor of shitty leadership. So if you want to disengage from shitty leadership, if you want to change that, start creating an opportunity where your folks trust you. But that trust is earned because you're doing the work to show them. And that's the key. It's not just about, respecting me or trusting me because of the position I hold, because command and control nonsense is long gone and we know it doesn't work. Respect my authority. Like, who cares about that kind of stuff? Like, what, no one argues with the landlord? Like, no, it doesn't work anymore. So it's about, your trust and respect is a byproduct of your ability to demonstrate to your staff that you are worthy of that. That's about building worthy connections. So it's taking that hierarchy out. It's taking that nonsense out. And it's just having authentic relationships. And creating a leadership brand does that. Let's see. No questions. All right. We'll continue moving forward then. All right. So next, sorry, so all these unnecessary windows that I don't need. Next, we are moving forward is effective feedback delivery. And effective feedback delivery is really blanketed by these two key questions, which are, how do you like to receive feedback and how do you like to be led? I always do the lead first. How do you like to be led? Tell me what you like in a leader. How do you like to personally be led at work? And notice I'm not saying manage. And I stay away from the word manager or management because in my lens, we manage process and we lead people. So I like to differentiate the two. So I like to ask the two questions. I like to listen for a response. I like to create that mentorship and inspirational sort of relationship, and then you continue. So how do you like to be led? People will generally answer, I've never been asked that before. I don't know what you mean. Well, what do you look for in a leader? What do I do that you like? What do I do that you don't like? What do I do what should I be doing that I could do more of to better support you? You're just creating those boundaries. You're understanding what people like. And from a personal perspective, as they start to tell you the truth, you're starting to break down those walls and you're creating more positive and productive perceptions. You're not looking at things from that uncomfortable lens. You're looking at it from an authentic lens. It changes the game just doing that alone. And then when you say, how do you like to receive feedback? Be prepared. And on top of that, when they tell you, you need to do it. So don't ask the question if you're not going to do it, because it's just a waste of time. So people will come back on that usually in one of two ways. I like direct to the point, no sugary, syrupy stuff. And again, those touchy-feely haters. And then you've got the people who can sometimes get emotional. I've had staff that hey, let's go have a chat. What did I do wrong? Seriously? Nothing. I just want to have a chat. We have bi-weekly one-to-ones. How's it going? What have you learned? What can I do more of? How are how's this going? How's this project? How's this task? It's just having an engagement conversation. It doesn't have to be clinical. There doesn't have to be a one-on-one form that you have to sign. Just have a conversation, but show your staff that you're giving of your time, that you're willing to have a conversation and make it all about them, because that's what it's about. And again, any of those shitty leadership perceptions will start to dissipate when you start to do that. Now, over time, this will improve and you'll start to have your marketing brand, all that stuff. And it will create this, it changes culture, it changes engagement. And what it actually does is it puts you as a leader in a position to start only managing the exceptions. You don't have to babysit the nitty-gritty and the day-to-day, because a lot of what happens when you create authentic connections is that things end up repairing themselves. This is why we focus on the employee first and then the customer, because if you focus on the employee, the customer will follow. When you have an aligned and engaged workforce because they feel like they work for someone who has their back, they have support, that changes the game. You will not have shitty leadership perceptions when you create an aligned and engaged workforce. It's the antidote right there. But how do you do it? Not everybody has the skill. That's why we're here. That's why we're here to help. So from that perspective, it's really an ability to do exactly what you say you're going to do. Furthermore, if there are major paradigm shifts, if there are changes in your staff, so if one of your staff goes through end of a relationship, the death of someone close, a address change, moving, buying, selling property, anything that's on the stress table that can be deemed, life altering, you need to ask these questions again. It's not about prying and getting personal. That's up to you to how, what your expectations and company, sort of mantras are on that. But if there are life-changing events that happen in an employee's life, excuse me, that can change or alter how they receive feedback, how they like to receive feedback, and how they like to be led. So some people, it could be in a complete opposite. It might be a minor change, but it's good to just level set and say, hey, obviously I heard you're going through some stuff. I'm not trying to pry. I'm here if you need me. However, has anything changed about how you like to be led? Is there anything we need to be doing differently? How can we better support you? And I tell you, if they didn't trust you before, or they didn't feel aligned, or that you had their back, that alone will make massive changes. So again, you don't want to be too personal. And of course, you need to maintain confidentiality with the things they share with you, because there's no greater way of eroding trust than by betraying a confidence. It's not a skill. It's probably one of the ultimate shitty leadership behaviors that you could do. So be aware of that, as I'm sure you already are. But don't forget, re-ask the questions if you need to from a potential, major change perspective. Okay, no questions, keep going. Actually, let's do a test and see. Okay, so there's still poll questions you can answer. So by all means, feel free, because there's still a bunch of you that haven't. So please do. It's great feedback for us, which is awesome. And that's not what I wanted to do. Let me end this. Oh, I don't want to do that. I'm going to relaunch that. Okay, so the poll is back up and you can re-answer now. I've cleared it, so by all means feel free. I need to do this here. Dun, da, da. There we go. That's where we are. All right, so yes, technical difficulties over. Shadow awareness is also part of the Ego Continuum brand. And when you think about it, I just kind of want to point out a few key areas as we sort of wind this down. So shadow awareness, we talk about shitty leadership obviously quite a bit. And part of that comes from the perceptions in the workforce and the perceptions that, there is a global epidemic of this. And there's a global epidemic on many things from this perspective. There is a high level of shitty leadership behaviors within the workforce today and cultures. And I don't think anyone would disagree how you would be able to see that. There is also a lack of managing up and a lack of comfort in employees who are comfortable to say, what are we doing about it? There's also this call on this courage and connection of people not understanding the difference of what authentic connection does within an engaged workforce environment, and how there is a complete connection between shitty leadership, disengaged employees, and the cost of disengagement and rework. Think about that. There's your ROI right there. You think about that. So a couple of key takeaways for you that you can think about. So, knowing who you are and showing who you are don't always match. And that's where misperceptions or perceptions can be created. So when you lead by your own example and you're lens aware, or you're aware of your shadows, what you're doing behind you or in front of you, depending upon where the sun is, and how you can manage those proactively. So think about things like your silence is consent. If you see or hear something and you do nothing about it, does that exonerate you from being involved? No, you're a leader. You should know what's going on. And you should be in a position where you're doing something about it. If you walk by something and say nothing, then you're consenting to it. So think about what that is. Think about the perceptions. There's a great example where somebody had, in a contact center environment, there was a great example about people, this contact center was really understaffed. And so as a result of that, they made the decision not to terminate any of their poor performers. So their cost of disengagement continued to skyrocket because there were careless mistakes and they were losing clients as a result of it. So because they didn't want to hire more staff and they chose to keep their staff, what they also, nobody was talking about, was that they decided not to coach or give feedback either. Because no, everyone needs to be on the phones, and training and development is too touchy-feely, and we don't want to invest the money and the time in that. See where I'm going with this? So in times when the touchy-feely people stuff needs to be put on more, that's when a lot of organizations pull it back or stop it altogether. Why do they do that? Think about why they do that. Think about where that comes from. And that lens awareness, their lens awareness, somewhere, depending upon, their corporate engagement or their past career and some of their choices, anything that has anything to do with people is just considered a cost. It's not, and they don't get the benefit, or they do and don't care, or they don't and they don't understand. So by creating this revolution and by talking about it, when companies want to be cutting, the people development side and the coaching and the feedback, that's where we need to be able to have the courage to say, this is the time when you should be doing more of it, because this is where you will then start to see the change. So these are the conversations that we need to have within organizations, that, we're not going to accept it anymore, because it just continues the beast of command and control and shitty leadership perceptions, and nothing changes. And then your good staff want to find other work, so they quit, or worst, they quit and stay. So think about that. Most people, when they made the determining factor to say, you know what, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. They quit and leave. And in many instances, what they left, they find in their new workplace. It's that sort of honeymoon period for a while, but then they start to recognize and see that the grass is not always greener on the other side. On top of that, you then get people who quit, but they stay. So they've just checked out. So when they were really engaged in wanting to be a part of something, they're there for a paycheck. They're just there because they have no other alternative, or they feel they have no other alternative. You cannot tell me that that's not going to impact performance. Of course it will, in many ways. So a couple other things. If you don't care, why should they? So if you give the perception that you don't care about certain things, or you're complaining about shitty leaders, yet you are one, the hypocrisy in that, staggering. And I love those epiphanal moments for people when they recognize they are, and then they realize what they've been doing. And that's actually an easy thing to fix once you make the awareness piece of that. The cost of disengagement, which we've talked about. And then finally, shitty leadership breeds shitty leadership, especially for the majority of the shitty leaders who don't know or recognize that those behaviors are shitty. So when you think about that, incompetency breeds incompetency. So if a shitty leader is the hiring manager for a senior manager role, who are they going to hire? Are they going to hire an effective leader? They're going to feel incredibly intimidated, or they're going to not like them and not know why. Or they're going to say things like, they're way too touchy-feely for me. Either way, it's an inaccurate hire, because that's exactly the kind of people that you would need. But they either see it and they shy away from it because it creates that innovative disruption feel with shame, and they don't want to go down that road. Or they haven't put that together yet, and they just say, no, I didn't like something else about them. Seen it many times. So as we wrap this up, next steps. So what is your corporate awareness? So if you think about where you currently work, how corporately aware is your organization? Are there things or people that are roadblocks? Think about that. Think about that overall concept of where you currently work. Think about where you've worked in the past, and think about what would you do differently if you had the power to do so, and then figure out why you don't have the power. Then think about and reflect on your own self-awareness. So are you self-aware enough to know you're self-aware? And once you determine that factor, or you're more courageous to answer that question, I want you to think about, are you ready? Are you really willing to do the work? Because when we take on clients and when we engage in our workshops, we have, a disclaimer that people sign that says, I am not going to not do this. I am going to be engaged. I am going to be understand that you may need to support me as I open that box and see what I don't like. But, if you're not going to play ball, then there's no point in being in the game. I can't believe I used a sports reference. That's great. But, at the end of the day, humor aside, it's very true. There's no point in engaging if you're not willing to play. There's just no point, because all you're doing is continuing that cycle of lying to yourself, which we all are great doing. I still do that. I still think that, I have that fast food combo, but I have a Diet Coke and that makes it all better, right? Of course it does. It's a good lie. I like that one. How active are your leaders? How active are your leaders? So use your lens to look at how active are they. So we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. So I would always apply a Mark lens. So how do I train myself through my own self-awareness to be able to see it through your lens? How do I see this situation through your lens? Help me understand. When I say that to people, that's what I want to understand. And that might sometimes change my reaction and how I think about things, because my lens, your lens, doesn't matter. What is the lens? What is the right lens to apply to this? Because it's not about being right. It's about being kind. And it's about having the courage to say, you're better at this than I am. That's vulnerability. That's because I'm aware of that. That's one area where I'm not a shitty leader. Because I'm okay to look at my staff and say, listen, you're much better at this than I am. Clearly navigating a PowerPoint presentation would be one of them, but anyway, that's one of them, and having a cat. But anyway, and what is contributing to your top 5? So what are your top 5 issues today? And how do you link that back to inactive or shitty leadership? Think about that, because there is an absolute guaranteed connection, sometimes more, sometimes many. So again, think about that. And then finally, our active leadership workshops that I spoke about, and is our sort of 6th pillar of today, is really focusing on how we bring all of this stuff together. So how do we move it all forward and, look at, starting at that awareness and that desire, and then moving into that knowledgeability and then reinforcement. So this is just sort of an online visual that sort of helps you recognize and see how this kind of all links into each other. So there's a lot more detail. There's more stuff on our website, which you can find at, that's not the website, but you can search Ego Continuum. It's also www.ego-continuum.com.co.uk if you're in the UK. That is my personal phone number. Please do visit our website. We have 9 minutes left. There's been no questions. If you don't mind, look at that. Wow. So clearly, because I reset the poll, either the person who put I'm uncomfortable answering didn't, but so far we are 100% I have demonstrated in the past. That's amazing. So there's still a few of you that haven't voted on the poll. By all means, please feel free to do so. I'm fine. If there's any question, now's your time to send me one. Folks, this whole concept towards shitty leadership is all about how we can come together and help each other. It's about how we can take these perceptions in the workplace. It's how we can take these perceptions in the marketplace and really flip it on its ugly head and say, listen, this is all about connection. I'm not going to fear connection. I'm going to learn how to understand that vulnerability is a strength. I'm going to stop laying the blame on others. I'm going to stop laying the blame on, that's too touchy-feely for me. I don't do feelings at work. The irony in all of this is, for the people who say I don't do feelings at work, that's a feeling. Just to say that alone is a feeling. So, again, think about it. I truly, sincerely, and humbly appreciate all of your time. Thank you for taking an hour out of your very busy day, and especially on a Monday, to spend some time. By all means, at any time, that is my email address. Feel free to reach out. You can contact us on the website. You can pick up the phone. You can send me a text. And if anybody wants a cat, I'm happy to provide a baby kitten. Anyway. Folks, have a lovely day. Thank you so much. And come join the non-shitty leadership revolution, and let's change the world.